The Xiaomi 15 Ultra is touted by many as being the best smartphone camera out there on the market, and arguably a phone that might actually finally replace a DSLR camera. Now, in this video, I'm going to be seeing if it's actually all hype or if it's actually justified. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, it's available between £1,030 to £1,300. Indeed, it depends in terms of where you actually source it from. Here, you'll get 512GB of internal storage and 16GB of RAM, although it's worth pointing out there is also a 1TB model available in certain markets. So let's kick things off and talk about the star of the show, and of course that is the rear camera configuration, which has been done in partnership with Leica. First off, you have got an LYT-900 image sensor with 50 megapixel and an f1.63 with OIS. Then you've also got the Leica floating telephoto camera, 50 megapixel yet again at f1.8 with OIS, and this is using the IMX858 image sensor. Then you have also got the Leica periscope telephoto camera, which goes up to 200 megapixel with f2.6 with OIS and the HP9 image sensor. Finally, you've also got the Leica ultra-wide camera with 50 megapixel, f2.2 and the JN5 image sensor. Now, the combination of all of this and the partnership with Leica results in some of the best still photography that I've ever seen come out of a smartphone. Yes, indeed, it does perform extremely well, and I would go as far as saying it does the best job out of all these smartphones out there on the market, at least when it comes to giving you a good sort of color tone, good sort of depth of field, and all while providing you an authentic image. Speaking of which, over here, I was actually using the Leica Authentic mode rather than the Vibrant mode because I felt that it provided me a bit more of an accurate reproduction, while the Vibrant mode does give you an extra bit of pop on your image, which will be appreciated in certain instances when it comes to taking photos of people, or indeed, let's say, of myself. Then I actually found that the Vibrant mode seemed to give you a little bit of an overzealous image. Now, nonetheless, when it came to just taking still photography, I was left jaw-dropped. Furthermore, with the motion tracking capabilities or even the live photo mode, it also does a great job when it comes to motion tracking and giving you that quick image. Now, yes, this is not going to compete with flagship DSLRs out there or even mid-tier DSLRs, but the flexibility and versatility of just getting out your smartphone and taking such incredible shots just left me absolutely jaw-dropped. I can't quite stress it enough. What Xiaomi have been able to achieve over here with the 15 Ultra and the partnership that they've got with Leica should absolutely be celebrated by a lot of photo lovers. Now, with all that praise, you might think that it's actually flawless when it comes to its rear camera configuration. Well, in this respect, I do actually think there are certain other smartphones out there that do better in certain instances. For example, when it comes to the zoom levels, you've only, and I say only in a loose term, up to 120 times. Some of the alternatives over there will provide you even greater zoom levels and, of course, more importantly, provide you even better clarity, be it in normal or low light conditions. Speaking of which, over here, when it comes to low light photography, I was actually left a little bit disappointed. Okay, you have got the likes of night mode, which can kick in and definitely give you a much better image. But when it came to zooming in and also looking at the shots and the amount of image noise, well, I was actually left pretty disappointed. Given that this smartphone is really touted by many as the best smartphone camera out there, I do think that when it comes to low light photography, there are other phones out there, for example, from the likes of Samsung, Google, Honor, and Vivo, that will do a little bit of a better job. Of course, it really depends as to what you're using your smartphone for, but in this respect, I did expect a little bit better from the 15 Ultra. Now, it is also worth considering, however, that you have also got a macro mode, and a macro mode itself is actually among one of the best out there. I think it does a tremendous job of capturing really nice images, of course, if you're going to be shoving your camera right close to the subject. And yes, I do feel sorry for the slug because I really got up into its grill. Ultimately, what I'm trying to say over here is that when it comes to the overall camera performance of this smartphone, it's really good. Although in certain instances it could have been improved, and therefore there is still some extra headway that can be done by Xiaomi and Leica to really make it the utmost best smartphone camera out there on the market in all aspects. Speaking of which, the selfie camera isn't the best out there. It's got a 32 megapixel count with an f2.0 aperture and an OV32B sensor. In this respect, it does a decent job, although some of the competitors will provide you even better selfies, not only in terms of reducing the image noise when it comes to low light shots, and yes, that can be aided by enabling night mode and or enabling the flash mode, which will effectively light up the phone in white and then take a photo, which is actually relatively snappy in comparison to some cheaper alternatives. So it's therefore something you might want to actually utilize, but also in terms of the amount of image or the raw data that it's actually being able to capture due to the sensor and also the fact that you've got that 32 megapixel count. Indeed, alternatives out there will provide you a higher megapixel count and or a more capable selfie camera, for example, when there is a dual camera foray at the front. Now, another area where I feel that it could improve is in terms of the overall recording. Now, first off, I should highlight that it's able to shoot at 8K at 30 FPS, 4K at 30, 60 and 120 FPS, 1080p at 30 and 60 FPS, and 720p at 30 FPS. In fact, you can also shoot 10-bit log at 4K 60, which is actually quite a rarity. This will be present in the Pro mode and therefore not in the default video mode when you're in the camera app. Then you have also got up to 30 times zoom available and the ability to switch between the ultra-wide and normal lenses. This is, of course, if you're going to be shooting at 720p, 1080p and 4K. If, however, you were to select 8K, then you will be able to select ultra-wide but then go up to 2 times zoom, and then you'll have to also stop recording and then switch to the main lens, then you'll be able to zoom up to 6 times. I don't think this is going to be bothering a lot of individuals because most consumers will be shooting at 1080p or 4K, but just something I thought I should highlight. Now, aside from the overall specs and what you're actually getting, in terms of the overall video performance, I was actually expecting a little bit better. And indeed over here, I do feel that certain other flagship smartphones and even in terms of the overall mid-tier smartphones out there will actually do a better job. See here, it was mainly due to the overall gyro EIS that was kicking in. This was trying to complement the OIS, which is present on majority of the lenses. And indeed over here, it did give me quite a bit of jitter. And this was not something that I was coming to expect in a flagship device in the 15 Ultra. Of course, if there was a mid-tier phone or indeed a budget phone, then I wouldn't expect anything more. But given the overall capabilities of the still photography, one might have expected even better improvements when it came to the EIS. In other words, the electronic image stabilization, which was causing some anomalies when it came to panning around. Now, of course, this will only affect you if you're going to be moving about or, for example, running around with the smartphone, which is going to be somewhat of a rarity. But if you're just going to be still and therefore panning from left and right, then it won't be an issue whatsoever. But of course, here I am testing every single scenario, and when considering some of the alternatives don't have any of these issues, then it just leaves you begging the question, could have Xiaomi or indeed Leica done a little bit of a better job when it comes to recording? Now, equally, when it comes to low light recording, I don't think it does that well. Indeed, if you were to switch to the ultra-wide mode, you will get very much small amounts of light coming in. But in the normal lenses, I do think there's quite a bit of noise, which is very much noticeable, be it if you're going to be shooting at 8K or 4K. Indeed, over here, I just feel that other smartphones just do a little bit of better job in terms of drawing in light and also giving you a little bit of a better image. Of course, this might not be a major talking point for certain individuals, but I just want to highlight every single thing and factor before you go out and buy this smartphone, and of course, for you to consider some of the alternatives and their capabilities, namely when it comes to recording. So if you're going to be shooting a lot of photos and videos, you might be wondering how is this going to impact your overall battery life? Well, in the global version, in other words outside of China, you've got a 5410 milliamp battery. And for my own control benchmarks, I actually netted a very impressive 29 hours and 1 minute. Indeed, as you'll be able to see from the other smartphones over here, it actually does fare very well. In real world usage, this effectively means that if you're going to be shooting some photos every now and then, and of course using the smartphone, expect roughly 2 days of solid usage without having to reach for a charger. If, however, you're going to be shooting more photos and a little bit of videos on the side, then expect roughly 1 to 1.5 days. If you're going to be shooting a lot more video and then a certain amount of photos, or indeed you're a heavy gamer, then expect sub 1 day, as you might come to expect with a lot of smartphones out there. Now, I would like to note that this score and indeed the benchmark that I conducted and the comments that I'm saying are without the photography kit. The reason I highlight this is because the photography kit adds effectively a 2000 milliamp power bank which attaches onto the smartphone, therefore allowing you to shoot for even longer. And this means that if you were to add the 2000 milliamp battery, I would not be surprised to get over 32 to maybe 35 hours in my benchmark, therefore fast exceeding a lot of the alternatives out there on the market. Now here, it is also great to see that you've got 90 watts of wired charging capabilities via the USB Type-C port. You have also got a pretty impressive 80 watt wireless charging and also reverse charging capabilities. This is actually really good and shows good sorts of capabilities with the smartphone, therefore meaning that you can actually replenish this battery pack extremely quickly before you head out of the home. Now this does actually bring me on to its overall design, and first off, a quick word for that photography kit. It's available for an additional £180, although it is a limited edition and therefore might be a little bit hard to source. Nonetheless, if you can get your hands on it, it's certainly something that you might want to consider, not only because you're getting a hard shell external case, but you're also getting that 2000 milliamp battery, which seamlessly plugs into the smartphone and also gives you even better grip on the phone itself when it comes to taking those shots. So something I would certainly worth considering looking at least if you can afford it, and indeed if you can even find it. But past the photography kit, let's talk about the actual smartphone itself. And here it's available in a black, silver or white finish. I do think its overall design is a little bit uninspiring. It doesn't really stand out over some rival alternatives, and aside from its massive camera lens at the back, you might easily mistake it for a mid-tier smartphone. So here I do wish that Xiaomi had spent a little bit of extra attention in terms of making it stand out and indeed look a little bit more special. Nonetheless, it has got a weight of 226 to 229 grams. So yes, it's a little bit heavier than some of the alternatives and has got a thickness of 9.35 to 9.48 millimeters. So this means that it's a little bit thicker and chunkier in comparison to some of the other flagships out there. And yes, you can feel it in your hand, and there is a bit of a top weighted feel just due to the rear camera lenses. Now it has also got an under-display ultrasonic fingerprint sensor, which is actually really rapid. Although it's actually quite disappointing to see that you have not got a front-facing 3D depth sensor or a ToF sensor, which would have provided you 3D biometrics. Therefore meaning that when it comes to face unlock, it is not secure. So therefore you might want to not use it and instead rely on your fingerprint or indeed a regular pattern or a PIN or a password for that increased amount of security. In terms of what you're actually looking at, you've got a 6.73 inch LTPO, which in other words gives you the full refresh range of 1 to 120 Hz AMOLED display. It's also got HDR10 Plus support with Dolby Vision, with a resolution of 1440 by 3200. Protecting it is Xiaomi's Shield Glass 2.0, and you've also got a pre-applied screen protector that comes out the box, therefore giving you some extra peace of mind. In fact, I should also highlight that the sides of the phone are slightly rounded, not in terms of giving you a completely curved edge, but rather that it makes it a little bit easier to grip. And that's certainly appreciated for myself at least, because I feel that while using it with a singular hand, it's just a lot better to actually access. Now, in terms of the overall brightness, using my calibrators, I noticed in sunlight mode up to 830 nits. While in max mode, with the sunlight mode disabled, it went up to 610 nits, and in the auto mode, it went up to 586 nits. In other words, this actually does get pretty bright, and I don't think you'll have any sort of issues looking at the phone at different viewing angles, and also straight on when it comes to bright sunlit conditions. It also has got a minimum brightness that goes all the way down to 1.9 nits, therefore showing good sort of versatility and therefore making it very dim in a completely pitch black room. And given the fact that you've got 1920 Hz PWM dimming, it means that you're going to get reduced eye strain. Although it's worth pointing out that on this note, there are some other smartphones out there that will even give you a higher frequency, therefore even further reducing the overall eye strain that you might be able to incur, at least if you're using your smartphone at night. So given its overall specs, you might expect a flagship chipset, and that's exactly what you're getting. You're getting a Snapdragon 8 Elite, which has an octa-core CPU and the Adreno 830 GPU. You've got 16 gigabytes of LPDDR5X memory with UFS 4.1 storage. And as a reminder, you've got 512 gigabytes to play around with, and in certain markets, 1 terabyte. Now, using Geekbench 6, I noticed a single core score of 2,926 and a whopping 9,009 when it comes to its multi-core score. As for GFX Bench, it went from 39 up to 395 FPS, and therefore means that when it came to multitasking, heavy gaming, or indeed taking some quick photos or videos, well, I had absolutely no issues whatsoever. That Snapdragon chipset by Qualcomm does a phenomenal job of giving you a very fluid experience and one that is extremely snappy. Therefore, it will very much suffice for a lot of individuals out there. Furthermore, I actually found that the phone didn't actually heat up all that much. And this is also thanks to the fact that Xiaomi has got a 3D dual channel ice loop system. It seems to do a pretty good job in keeping the phone pretty cool, even when it came to using the phone in heavy gaming sessions. Now, another thing that goes hand in hand with the overall raw performance is software. And here you've got Xiaomi's HyperOS 2, which is built upon Android 15. You're promised 4 major updates. Now, the customization and the personalization that is actually available via the Xiaomi software is actually really extensive and among one of the best out there on the market. And here you have got ways of actually making the software really tuned for what you're actually using it for. Although it's worth mentioning that it might be a little bit overwhelming, and therefore you might want to take some time to actually learn about all the features and understand what they actually do or don't do. With that said, I do think that the AI erase tool is not as good as some of its competitors. Here I'm thinking of the likes of Samsung, Oppo, and namely Google, which actually do a tremendous job. Here I do feel that the AI integration is appreciated in certain instances, although when it comes to what I feel that most people will be actually interacting with AI the most, in other words with the AI erase tool and the imaging tools that are available, I don't think it's as well done. Furthermore, it's never appreciated to see any sort of bloatware. Unfortunately, it's very much the case with a lot of Chinese manufacturers, and indeed it is present on the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. A little bit disheartening given the fact that it is a flagship smartphone, but again, it's to be expected. Thankfully, you can easily delete and uninstall some of the bloatware, and therefore means it's not going to overly bother you other than when you first set up the smartphone. Now, to conclude, I would also like to round up some of the other features, and here you've got stereo speakers that do get actually pretty loud. You've also got Dolby Atmos support should you wish to use it, therefore giving you even better dynamism when you're watching movies or indeed gaming. And in my case, I actually found to utilize it, and it's nice to see you've even got some EQs that you can select from. Then you've also got dual band Wi-Fi 7 support, therefore meaning that you're going to get good sort of connectivity, and you've also got Bluetooth 6 with the vast majority of high quality codecs supported, with the likes of LDAC to LHDC and indeed aptX due to the Qualcomm chipset. Then you've also got a dual nano SIM tray, although you can opt for an eSIM capability as well. So for example, you can have a singular nano SIM and eSIM, or you can have dual nano SIMs or indeed dual eSIMs, therefore giving good sort of versatility, which is quite useful, for example, if you're going to be traveling frequently. So with all that in mind, it brings me on to my verdict of the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. And here, the key selling points are the fact that you've got a fantastic camera array at the back, arguably class leading when it comes to still photography with normal zoom levels. Then you've also got a really nice display, good set of features, a flagship chipset with 16 gigabytes of RAM and 512 gigabytes of internal storage, and also very good battery life. Combining all of this at a very competitive price, it means that it's actually very easy to recommend this smartphone, at least if photography is one of the key talking points for you, and as a result, it gets my Best Buy award. However, do consider that there are some other alternatives out there that will perform better in certain areas. For example, phones out there that will give you an even better software experience. By that I mean less bloatware. Others that will also give you even better zoom capabilities, not only in terms of clarity, but also in terms of the zoom level itself. And also when it comes to night photography and also video capabilities, there are also other phones out there that will do an even better job. Now, I'd be curious to know if you would pick the Xiaomi 15 Ultra in comparison to some rival alternatives down the comment section below. And if you have liked this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated and allows me to continue delivering honest reviews like this one. As such, I've been Totally Dubbed and I'll hopefully see you next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.